Hey everyone, what's up? What's going on? And welcome back. CantDrop here, back at it, bringing you all a Covenant overview for Survival Hunters and my thoughts on it. But this should also, I'm hoping, help Marksman Hunter and BM Hunter decide their own Covenant choice based off of how you play and what your spec is for the Hunter class. Now, in this video, we're going to go over each Covenant's class ability, each Covenant's signature ability. We'll talk a little bit about what I think personally is super beneficial for each Covenant and why I would choose to play it. Then we'll go over at the same time a little bit about what I think each one will be good in. Is it going to be good in M+? Is it going to be good in raiding? PvP, what would I use? And that also leads me into the last bit of the video, which will talk a little bit about my final thoughts on what I'm going to be doing for my character over the expansion of Shadowlands and what kind of Covenant testing I still want to do. But without further ado, I just want to get us started off with the Necrolord Covenant. Now, Necrolord is a great Covenant. This was the Covenant that I tested first when I first hit level 60 as Shadowlands came out. Now, the first ability we're going to talk about is Fleshcraft, the signature ability. It is awesome, tell you all the truth. It is a great ability. It basically channel over 4 seconds. It gives you a shield for 20% of your maximum hit points. And when channeled around dead enemies or mobs, it can give you a shield equal to 50% of your total hit points. The buff duration is 2 minutes and it has a 2-minute cooldown. So not too bad. But the downside is that it is with the 4-second channel, it is extremely clunky to deal with when trying to run Mythic Plus. Mixed with the Death Chakram ability, which is the Hunter's class ability for Necrolord, it can hit from 1 to 7 mobs. Each time it hits dealing damage, it increases its damage by 15%. So at the max of 7 hits, it does 105% total damage at the 7th hit. Also, over the course of each hit it will give you 2 to 3 focus without the Necrotic Barrage Conduit, so just baseline. With the Conduit, it'll give you a maximum of 5 focus per hit, which equals out to 35 total focus throughout 7 hits. But like I said earlier, the Fleshcraft Shield is extremely clunky when trying to do Mythic Plus and time them and not get left behind by your group and lack in DPS. In Mythic Plus, in my opinion, it's good when you have time to cast it, and the Death Chakram is okay. It's more of a meh kind of ability. When it's single target, I think it shines a lot more than when you're trying to AoE with it. But for raids, I would say, it's probably okay. But for PvP, I think this personally is where Necrolord will shine the most. Because with Death Chakrams being a ranged ability, you have more ranged damage and helpful buildup of burst with the added damage of maybe if you're running Bloodseeker in PvP, which I don't think you would, but if you do, that's extra bleed damage, your Serpent Sting, your bombs, all that stuff equals, extra dot damage. So to have something that rapidly builds up damage for extra damage is extremely nice on a single target. Now let's move on into the Night Fae. This is the second Covenant that I tested. I am finally renowned 20 with it, but I just want to say that this Covenant is extremely powerful in AoE situations right now. Even in single target, it helps a lot if you are lacking gear, due to the fact that it has consistent output and damage for when you and your pet deal damage. So basically, Wild Spirits, this is the Hunter's class ability. You drop an area on the ground, dealing an initial 400-ish damage, marking all targets with Hunter's Mark for 15 seconds. While it is active, each damaging ability you or your pet use against a target in the area strikes up to 5 targets for 600-ish damage. So higher haste, in my opinion, the more this ability does for more AoE potential and helpful single target damage. So if you're lacking Mastery or Versa, I would say stack a little extra haste with this ability and you could be doing just as much damage as if you had the Mastery or Versa. But it would lack due to the fact that you'd only have this ability up once every 2 minutes. Now the signature ability for Night Fae is Soul Shape. It's on a 1.5 minute cooldown, where you transform into some type of spirit animal of your choice after you go through certain Covenant quests and campaign areas, and you unlock it in the Grove. This increases your movement speed by 50%, but don't get me wrong, Soul Shape is baseline, comes with every class. in every spec. You just get the different forms or the shapes or the different animals you could turn into, the different soul shape. While you are soul shaped, this ability you are allowed to use Flicker. Flicker is basically a 15-yard blink. So it's extremely handy to kite around mobs that target you in dungeons, that focus down one enemy, that do super amounts of damage. Or it's extremely helpful, in my favorite case, to use it in the Maw. Now, the Maw, everybody knows, is a pain in the ass to begin with. So extra movement speed or extra mobility, while you cannot mount until this recent reset, this ability is extremely handy. Up next, we are going to talk about the Kyrian. Now, Kyrian I have not tested yet. It is on my to-do list. Believe me, I cannot wait to test this. With how long the campaigns take and how boring the quests are and how ridiculously time-consuming this is, I have not had the time, and the campaigns are just super boring in my opinion. I don't mean to hate on the campaign, but I have a hard time sitting for 5 hours as a level 60 wanting to get better gear to go do a brand new campaign. So I'm probably going to take a break from it for a little while. The main reason I would want to try Kyrian is for Resonating Arrow. Now, this ability allows you to fire an arrow at a targeted location that deals 321 arcane damage or 320-ish arcane damage to any enemy in the area that the arrow lands, and fills the area with echoing anima for 10 seconds. The effect causes your attacks to ignore line of sight in the area, and increasing your critical strike chance by 30% against those targets. Leaving the area of echoing anima will still allow the hunter to ignore line of sight towards the enemy for 4 seconds. And as a signature Covenant ability, you get the Steward. Basically, you summon him, he brings you 3 Phials of Serenity that instantly heal you for 20% of your maximum health, and cures diseases, poisons, bleeds, and curses, which is basically a PvE and another PvP Mending Bandage. Just an instant cast with 10% less health total. But you receive it as an instant cast. And last and definitely least on the amount of hunters I've seen play and the amount of information I have on Venthyr, it's gonna be Venthyr. Now, their signature ability is pretty sweet. That's Door of Shadows, basically a 2-second cast that you can teleport up to 20 yards or so. And that helps you get to like where warriors can leap or where demon hunters can jump to. But it just helps you with basically overall, in my opinion, open world mobility to get around for quests and stuff. Now, the class ability for hunters for Venthyr is Flayed Shot. Basically, now, this is what really gets me about the ability is it has a 10% chance to proc a kill shot, right? That's awesome. On any target, usable on any target at any percentage of health. That's awesome. Flayed Shot deals 2200-ish damage over 14 seconds. That's sweet. That's not bad damage. But here's my thing. You get 1 tick of damage every 3 seconds, okay? And its duration is 14 seconds. So the duration and the ticking of the dots doesn't even line up for the Covenant ability to begin with. Like, how are you going to get 4 ticks of damage and have basically a 40% overall chance of getting 1 Flayed Shot proc to get a free kill shot when you can't even get that 5th even though you waited the 2 seconds to get to the 3? That makes no sense to me. I think Blizzard just needs to look at that ability and rework it completely. So unfortunately, I'm extremely sorry, everyone. I do not have a lot of information on Venthyr, basically due to the fact that it's too unpredictable for me to even determine or try and predict any type of amount of DPS that you could do, even with a sim. Like, I've seen a couple of people sim Venthyr and they sim like 800 below me with the same item level. Or like somebody simmed Night Fae or Kyrian versus Venthyr and they simmed literally like 600 damage per like DPS below the entire thing. Yeah, you know, it's another dot, it's cool, but at the same time I really don't think it's worth it. Now, while we're not going to go over Venthyr in this section, now what would make Kyrian, Necro, and Night Fae worth playing? Well, for Necro, having a shield to help you just simply not be so squishy, it is a lifesaver. It can also help prevent damage while channeling with dots on yourself, like if you have magic damage like Corruption or Curse of Agony, any type of bleeds or poisons or anything like that on you. You can just sit there and channel it and it will help your healer, like it will help you negate some of that damage for your healer to top you off. Or it'll help you persist in a 1v1 duel or situation where You know, if you can get a trap off, you can channel it while the bleeds are going off, so you don't have to waste like a feign death if you're not using the stratagem Lego or, you know, something like that. It has its own niche uses and circumstances. Now, that added with the focus regen of Death Chakram that has a decent ramp up damage at a range is also really fun to play around with. And extremely convenient to use for focus and range parts of fights. Like, it's extra damage when you want focus, and when you need focus at a range using Eagle, you throw Chakram. It has its niche uses. It has its uses, but I just wish the damage was not as underwhelming as it is. But overall, I think Necrolord is going to be okay for Mythic Plus. It gets clunky if you try and Fleshcraft all the time. The damage from Death Chakram, like I said, isn't like superb. It's moderate. So in raids, I think it'll do a little bit better on boss fights. But for PvP, I honestly think that this is where this Covenant will shine the most. Now let's move on to Night Fae. What might make Night Fae this good, or so good that a lot of hunters run it? Well, let's talk about the Soulbind. So Naya, the first Soulbind that you open, is absolutely nuts. So basically, her ability is that she gives your damaging or healing spells a chance to give you a buff that grants you 1% maximum hit points and 25 mastery per stack. Now, stacks do overlap, so you are able to use them. Basically, you can just continue to attack as stacks will consistently build up over time. Sometimes you won't get one, so you get bad RNG, but sometimes you can get like 4 or 5 in a row. So you can build up some nice mastery plus max hit point buff to help your healer and your damage, which is sweet. But here's the big kicker. When you use your Wild Spirits ability, basically it gives you an instant 16 stacks. So if you start the fight and you use your Wild Spirits to get 16 stacks, 16 times 25 is around 450. That's 450 bonus mastery that you're getting. That's also 16% to your maximum hit points, which is huge. That's 3 times a Priest Fortitude buff right now. So that's huge survivability, on top of huge damage burst for your focus spending abilities, and on top of that, extra healing for your Spirit Bond, which isn't super important, but to tell you the truth, it is extremely handy to help your healer, especially a druid when they're already doing hots all the time. Or it's extremely handy for a disc priest when they're literally popping shields on everybody and they're just spamming damage. So their damage is turning to healing while your healing is helping them heal. It's really nice. At the same time, you get Soul Shape, which basically, you know, once every 90 seconds, you can blink 3 times or 4 times within a 15-second duration to shoot off another 15 yards in a random direction. So it's another super mobility. On top of that, in the same Soulbind tree as Naya, the one right down from her first one after you get your first conduit slot, it gives you the ability when you shapeshift to gain 5% of your maximum hit points every 5 seconds while in Soul Shape. So that's huge. That's huge self-healing on demand on top of mobility. I think finally it's time to talk about the Kyrian. Now, Kyrian I haven't had a chance to test due to finally hitting Renown 20 with Night Fae, and you know, it's extremely hard to give you consistent information on this because I haven't played it myself, but I'm hoping that the speculation and the information I have so far is correct. Like I said, all this is purely speculative, but Resonating Arrow allows you to hit people affected by your arrow through walls or pillars. So effectively, you can line of sight anybody and not get touched by them, can't get charged by them, can't get shadow stepped, can't get stunned. You know, you have advantage at that point. On top of the 30% crit chance to targets affected by it, I think it could be good for M+, raids, and PvP. Now, even when the target leaves a circle for 4 seconds, you can still LOS them and hit them through walls and stuff, which is huge. But my big question is when that 10-second duration ends, does that 4 seconds carry over after it ends, or does it just stop with the 10 seconds? It was only if they moved out of the circle, but prior to this 10 seconds being over. That is a crazy ability. You cheese just about anything, in my opinion. But mixed with that, with the Steward, that gives you Files of Serenity that heal you for 20% of your maximum hit points on instant use. And it cures poisons, diseases, curses, and bleeds. That's crazy. So it helps you get huge burst potential on top of that with the Pelagos Covenant Soulbind, which basically gives you around 300-ish mastery on use of Resonating Arrow, which is a 1 minute cooldown compared to Night Phase 2 minutes. So it could help you get super amounts of burst, and it could be really good for you. It's all based on how you want to play and what you want to do. So my opinion is that Kyrian is like the all-arounder kind of, due to the fact it gives you potions that is a mending bandage for PvE and PvP, on top of, you know, being able to LOS for survivability and line of sight people. Now, what could be good? You know, so Necrolord, in my opinion, is going to be okay in Mythic Plus. It's kind of okay in raids. I honestly think that it would be best in PvP. Night Fae M+, it's crazy good in AoE situations. In single target situations, I'd say it's really consistent, so it's helpful. On top of that, I think in PvP with Soul Shape, it would probably be really good, but the hard part would be keeping somebody in your circle for the full 15 seconds. But even at that 30-second duration on that mastery buff you get is huge 30-second burst window potential. Now, Venthyr, honestly, not good single target, especially when procs overlap. In addition to that, there's no AoE potential to it, but it may be good in 1v1 situations and PvP duels, but it really depends on your RNG, in my opinion. And now Kyrian. I would say probably about the same, you know, as Night Fae for Mythic Plus, maybe a little less because it's not consistent damage. You're basically hoping for that increased percentage of crit to do work. But I think it would be just about as good, if not just a little under the radar in AoE and single target for raids and dungeons. But for PvP, I think this is where it would completely outshine Night Fae. Because PvP situation, you want to line of sight people, you need to keep people, you know, and the ability that Kyrian has allows the enemy to move out of the circle and you can still gain the effect, at least for 4 seconds. So I'd say Kyrian's probably the better way to go for PvP if you're Night Fae. I'm sorry if you have any, like, if you think otherwise, please let me know in the comments. Finally, my thoughts on everything overall is, honestly, I'm probably going to swap between, I'm going to try Kyrian at some point. And then depending on if I like Kyrian or Necrolord more, I'll probably swap between those two for PvP. Basically because, you know, Denathrius's trinket, the Dreadfire Vessel, is a ranged trinket. So using the Kyrian ability and then using your big bursty trinket mixed with continuously dotting them and throwing bombs through the wall, that could be some kind of cool little arena playstyle. So I'm going to fiddle with it at some point. But for M+ in rating, I honestly am probably going to stick with Night Fae for the most point, just due to the fact that it's so consistent and the burst potential is so huge mixed with your coordinated assault. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to smash that subscribe button, beat the hell out of that like button, and leave a comment down below letting me know what you guys think. Is it, you know, what covenant are you guys going to stick with? Are you guys going to end up swapping back and forth when you want to PvP more? Or are you just going to, you know, stick with your PvE and make your PvE covenant a PvP covenant? Well, with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. CantDrop out.